Here's a question I always wanted to ask firefighters. I know this is going to be bizarre. We may have to edit this out. I don't know. But you know how you throw each other, do that over your shoulder. What do they call that lift when you throw someone over your shoulder?
The fireman's carry.
The fireman's
carry, yeah, or dead man's carry.
Dead man's carry, anyway. So I just wonder, do firefighters ever throw their wives over, or does the wife, if she's a firefighter, throw her husband over her shoulder and say, "Come on, Rick, let's go to bed"? Does that ever happen? Oh, you're blushing.
No.
Welcome to the KnifeWife podcast. I'm Suz, married to Bob Terzuola. This podcast is about couples who live, love, and work together. And it has little to do with knives. Hi, welcome to the KnifeWife podcast. I'm Suz, married to Bob Terzuola. Say hi, Bob.
Hello, everybody.
This podcast is about couples who love, live, and work together. It has little to do with knives, and all about the lifetime of colorful stories and the funny moments they have brought to our lives. Today we have Lori Hinderer with us, and she's not just any gal. What can I tell you? She's a horsewoman. She's a former firefighter. I don't know if she still does that. She's known Bob for many years before I knew Bob. So you tell us how you met Lori and Rick.
It was at a California knife show, and Lori and Rick came up to my table. I think I was selling only fixed blades at that time. It was a long time ago. And they were both firefighters at the time. This was before they were getting into making knives. And we had some long chats and got to know each other, and I really admired both of them. And we talked knives and we talked fire, and we just really hit it off, as I remember.
You talked fire? What do you talk fire? What do you talk? Your campfire?
Well, they told us stories about, fighting fires together and how they were together. And I had never met a couple who had been fighting fires together before.
Neither have I.
Okay.
So anyway.
There they were, in front of me.
Yep. So say hello, Lori.
Hello.
Hi. And you're in Ohio, right?
That's correct. Shreve, Ohio.
Okay. Well, I'm a former Midwesterner. So,
yes.
Yep. We're tough chicks.
We are. We're country people.
Yep. We are. I grew up in the suburbs, but became one many years later, and I still am. I'm a farmer at heart. Anyway, tell us a little.
Gets out.
No, it doesn't go away. Tell us a little bit about meeting Rick and working together, and you have so many wonderful stories to tell. So just, I'll let you have it. You take the floor now.
Well, Rick and I met back in 1985, quite some time ago, and we met through a mutual friend who I had known since kindergarten. She loved horses. Of course, I loved horses, and Rick was going to a local agricultural school, and he was in the horse program there. And she told him, "You have got to meet this girl." So we met, and so they say the rest is history, but we pretty much clicked right away because of our love of horses and really animals in general, and especially dogs too. So
yes, I saw your beagle the other day. It was kind of muddy.
Yeah, he loves hunting anything, whether it's fur bearing or not, he'll hunt it. So yeah, Great. So he started helping out on my dad's farm, which we had horses and cows, and so we spent the whole summer together training horses and doing miscellaneous farm work here and there, hard work.
Unloading hay, which is very hard.
Unloading hay, yeah. A lot of hay. So, I mean, if you can make it through some of those nasty, sweaty jobs together without wanting to wring each other's necks, you're in pretty good shape. So,
well, wanting is one thing, doing it is another, I've discovered.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like being in a 120-degree haymow in the middle of July where you're just covered with chaff, and it's just tempers can get kind of flared up after about 8 loads.
Yes, I've done it. I used to be able to throw a bale of hay to the second floor of my barn. I can't even pick up a bale of hay now, probably.
Yeah.
So Yep.
Well, fortunately, with us having 6 horses yet, throwing hay is part of the, routine that you do every week. So I still can do some of those things, luckily. So
Great. So anyway, so you work together other places too.
yes, we of course on the fire department. We were both on the fire department for about 10 years, and so we did EMS squad calls together, and we always worked well together. I mean, on a fire department, you're always going to have people who have their strengths and their weaknesses. It's just how it rolls. And so we would help each other out. We would go to calls together, and of course, our firefighting too. We both wanted to do more than what the state of Ohio at that time required, which was just 36 hours of training. So we went
Oh,
ahead and took it to the career firefighter level at that time was 240 hours. So
yeah.
we became fully trained in that.
What prompted both of you to become firefighters? What was the fascination to go from the hauling hay into firefighting and doing it together? What was the motivation there?
Well, Rick and I were both volunteer firefighters. So you have, all your regular work that you do. And when you first get on the fire department here in Wayne County, you were at that time assigned a duty night, and so you had to go to training at night, and it was EMS training, was almost a year of training. And then the fire training was around 6 months, and we wanted to be able to serve our community. And there's always a need, and especially smaller communities, for volunteer fire department. And I had a childhood friend that was on our fire department for quite a long time. She inspired me, and we just knew it was something we would like. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that opportunity to have that level of training was possible for just someone who, didn't per se go to a professional school. So we really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And were you ever in a situation where there was a hairy fire together? I mean, a hairy fire, a big fire, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we actually were on many. In a smaller community, you also have a lot of farms around here,
Mm.
and we went to many barn fires, unfortunately, which they burn so quickly. There's really not much to save because of the fire load that's there.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a big fire that we actually did an interior attack together, and it was in the middle of July, very hot, about 90 degrees, and
Mm.
we responded directly to this call, which was only just a few miles down the road from us, because we carry our fire gear because we live about 12, 13 minutes away from the fire department. So we kept our gear at home
Mm.
because it wasn't feasible for us to go to the fire department, get your gear, and be able to get on a truck. So we
Right.
always responded. So we responded directly. So we got there about the same time that the main engine did. And our chief sent us to the upper floor, which we had to go up a staircase. And our chief was holding the door open with a long pole called a pike pole because the door was literally melting
It's called a
as
pike
we were
pole.
going. Yes, yeah, it's a long pole with kind of pointed end and kind of a hook on it too, to where it's primarily used for pulling ceilings down and other applications for that. And so he was holding it open because the heat was coming out. So we went upstairs and we were looking for fire. We were directly above the fire at a garage that was below us. So
How hot was it?
they figured between 600 and 700 degrees.
Jeez. Gee.
So of course you have an air pack on, and it's called a SCBA, and it's a self-contained breathing apparatus. So you're not breathe. I mean, you would be dead
Right.
very quickly if you
Right.
breathed air that quick or that hot. So yeah, we had that experience together, and we just we enjoyed doing that together. I mean, yes, there's always an adrenaline rush with
Did you
things
put the
like that.
fire out?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it wasn't just us. There was other teams working because it was a rather large building and it had a pretty good fire load in the garage because they
Uh-huh.
worked on four-wheelers.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I grew up with a father who was a safety engineer. And so we'd go up, my mother would make, this was before the internet, my mother would make a reservation like at the Mackinac Island Hotel. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a
No.
beautiful old wood hotel. It's not like the Dell here in San Diego. Beautiful. And we drove, and it took, I don't know, a long time to get there, and we had to take a ferry. You can't take your car. We take a ferry over there, and then we come to the hotel, and my father looks at the hotel, and I can see that Captain Safety, which I called him, was looking around like, it's going to be a fire trap. I knew what was coming. And my mother, they had gone there on their honeymoon, and she meant so much to her to go to this hotel. But my dad said, how many exits does every room have? And the girl behind the desk, she's like, 19 years old. She goes, how many exits? One, I think. Oh, no.
When you've been on the fire department and you learn all this and you see the devastation of fires, it changes how you see everything. I mean, we would drive around and see a house with a very steep roof line and think, oh,
Ooh.
that would be horrible to ventilate that
Yeah.
that house.
Yeah.
And then of course every call, every wreck that we would go on that was more of a bad wreck that you remember, it's like, oh yeah, that young man was trapped in that vehicle and we had to use, almost all of our extrication equipment to get him
Mm-hmm.
out. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it changes you.
Yeah. Well, Captain Safety, we did not stay at the hotel. And we went back on the ferry, and it was getting dark, and my mother was very sad. And we went and stayed in a very safe motel on the other side, on the mainland. But I understand, he had seen so many things, and he was responsible for so many things, and figuring out. He used to say he was a professional worrier.
Yeah.
We had neighbors that just left, just moved, and one was a policeman, one was a fireman,
Uh-huh.
and they were really good at figuring out what could go wrong always. And
Yes.
and I've just sort of skipped through life. And they did not. So maybe I need adult supervision. I don't know. But
It was good having them around.
yeah, well, when we
Absolutely.
came home from Blade, a friend of ours who's a knife maker shared an Uber with us home. And when I got home, I couldn't remember where I had put the key, and it was in my bag at 4:30 in the morning. I had stuck it in a bag, a safe place, which is guaranteed to lose something. And I couldn't find it, and I didn't remember. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to go around the back of the house, and Bob, go to the neighbor. She has a key. So if the doors aren't open in the back, which they shouldn't be, but just in case, sometimes they are." And it was dark, and I was running, and it never occurred to me that, I don't know, there'd be patio furniture on the patio that I'd run into. No, never occurred to me. And so I tripped over a chaise lounge and went flying into the air. And I remember I was airborne for so long that I said to myself, oh, shit, something's going to happen. I just thought, oh, no. But as Bob said, I landed head first.
Fortunately, she landed on her head,
Oh,
so nothing broke.
So anyway, so I was laying there, though I did remember where the key was. And then our friend who was with us happens to be a Navy SEAL. And so it's good to have either a firefighter or a Navy SEAL who can carry a dead, weighted person, because I definitely was not going to get up and walk around. And, he put me on the couch. But, I was thinking about when I was, reading your things that, here's a question I always wanted to ask firefighters. I know this is going to be bizarre. We may have to edit this out. I don't know. But you know how you throw each other, do that over your shoulder. What do they call that lift when you throw someone over your shoulder?
The fireman's carry.
The fireman's
fireman's
carry?
carry, yeah, or dead
Anyway.
man's carry.
Dead man's carry anyway. So I just wonder, do firefighters ever throw their wives over, or does the wife, if she's a firefighter, throw her husband over her shoulder and say, come on, Rick, let's go to bed? Does that ever happen? Oh, you're blushing.
No.
All right. Okay. Well, there goes that. But I just wondered. I thought, well, if you have that skill, how else could you use that?
Well, Well, I mean, there's all sorts of things for bags of feed. That's what it usually comes to is when you're throwing stuff up over your shoulder, it has to do with animal care.
Ah, okay. Not your personal animal. Okay.
I was wondering how they got into knives. That always interested me to get, from firefighting and being on the farm and so forth, and all of a sudden you get into knife production. How did that happen?
Because they couldn't find a good knife, so they had to make them themselves.
That is part of it, but Rick was also a farrier or a horseshoer
Mm.
for many years before he started his knife making career. And of course, being a farrier, you're pounding on hot steel, shaping a
Mm-hmm.
horseshoe to the horse's hoof.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just loved moving steel, and so he forged out a knife out of a plow point, actually,
Out of a
for a
plow
friend of
point.
ours.
Ah,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
And he forged that knife out, and he did it for a friend of ours who was retiring from the Army after 25 years of service. He was a Vietnam veteran. And so Rick wanted to make him a knife because, of course, we couldn't afford to buy a knife for him at that time. And it just gave him the bug, to see what else he could make. And so he was going to the local gun shows anyway, and there was a knife maker there by the name of Tom Downing. And he did stock removal, and Rick just always admired his knives. And so he was one of his early tutors to learn some of the trade, but an awful lot he did on his own through trial and error.
Mm.
And a lot of his horseshoeing and horse training customers were also his first knife customers. He would take his
Mm.
knives to his calls and say, "Hey, look what I made." And they liked what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sold several knives to his horseshoeing and training customers. So, and just after a while, he was making more knives and selling more knives than his desire to shoe horses, and eventually, got out of horse training too.
Yeah. Well, I said to Sally Rogers that I said, is it true that Richard started making knives to support his ranch habit? And I would think that Rick could make knives to support a horse habit because having had many, I know that they are incredibly expensive. At least he was a farrier. That saved you money right there.
Yeah, and for him that getting out of the horses, the training and the shoeing was partially because of health. He had his hip replaced in 2001.
Wow.
And as you know, holding up a horse's leg, 1,000-pound horse, holding up the leg, and they lean, they get tired, and that was pretty hard on his hip before he had
Mm-hmm.
it replaced.
Wow.
So that was one of the reasons that he got out of the training and shoeing, and he absolutely fell in love with making knives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's obvious because you have a huge business. And then he doesn't forge knives anymore. I mean, you have CNC machines, you have factories basically, right?
Yes, we do. We have our production company,
Mm-hmm.
but he also still forges knives.
He does. Okay,
Yes,
cool.
ma'am, he does. He still will make Damascus, and he really still enjoys that part of knife making, the forging. I don't think that's ever something that will leave him either to do that. It's part of the artistic part of it.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what Damascus is, it's layered steels, different steels, and they make a pattern. So for some people don't know what that is, so I thought I better clear that up.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know he did that. Still, I knew he did that, but I
Yeah.
didn't know he still did that. And what's your role in the business? Everything else?
Just about jack of all trades, a
Mm-hmm.
master of none.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
no, I did the bookkeeping for several years before we got large enough that we needed someone who was far more educated in that field than what I was. So I just primarily help take care of the animals on our farm. I still enjoy going to one or two knife shows a year just to see people that, like Bob, that we have a long
Thank you.
history with, and just to stay in touch with the knife community in general.
Yeah, yeah. I love going to Blade, but I'll tell you, I'm doing a lot of deals with different companies, and I'm running around, and people want to see me here and they want to see me there. I hardly got to visit with anybody except at night in the
Right.
pit. I was just, and the first day, Friday, I had talked so much that I could hardly talk. We went out to dinner with the kids, and I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a long, long dinner because I was
Right.
done talking. But thank goodness they had lots of energy and they did the talking. So, what else? Well, what advice would you give other couples? I know you've been together, 38 years now? What
Yes.
advice would you give them? And you have so many levels that you've worked together in. What advice would you give to other couples who are working together?
The advice I would give is to learn to be very patient with that person and to know that that spouse or, either the husband or the wife is not always going to be the first priority. And sometimes you're the second, sometimes you're the third. And but it always comes around,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
given time, and just to appreciate the small things, because as most people who own a business can tell you, things do not happen overnight. It's can be a very long process to reach success. I always figured that if we have our health and we have our freedom, that we're still doing really good. We still have food on our table, and you just learn to be patient with each other, and especially to communicate also,
Yeah.
and know that, hard times, they suck while you're in them, but they will pass. And we lived in a 300 square foot apartment in a horse barn for 19 years.
Wow.
And so
That's
300 square
closeness.
feet.
Whoa.
Yeah, but, we were outside most of the time. I was outside, working on the farm. He
Mm-hmm.
was, in his knife shop, so it was pretty much a place to, lay your head down at night and take a shower. So it really didn't matter to us
Mm-hmm.
in that 19 years. So it can take a long time, but you communicate and you have patience and faith that things will come around.
Right. And I think for couples, once you live through one hard time, whatever it be, whether it be personally or health wise or family wise, whatever, once you get through one big thing, you know that you can make it through other things. The first one is probably the roughest, but I think after that, it doesn't get easier, but it's certainly you have confidence in your relationship and knowing that you can weather this.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, and there's always going to be hard times. There's never ever going to be just one thing, and sometimes during a hard time, you're going to have multiple hard times. That's just the nature of life in general. And yeah, I mean, you can have a crappy day at work, but you have each other's back, and that's a huge bonus of working together.
Yeah. That's what Bob always says.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, do you have you've got two fun stories to tell, the wall knife or the knives that you did. I think because of firefighters, I think the 9/11 knife story would be the best to tell.
Okay, that was about our friend Keith Kaiser. Keith has been a friend of ours for a long, long time. He was a firefighter in Brooklyn, and he was on the first truck to arrive at the World Trade Center on 9/11 that came from Brooklyn. And it was one of those trucks that got completely demolished when the buildings came down. And Keith's house lost 7 firefighters. No, I think it was 11 of their crew were lost that day. And one of them was a young recruit who had just been with them for a little while. And he was a knife collector, and he had collected knives from 7 different custom knife makers, myself being one of them. Pat Crawford, Gil Hibben, several others.
Elishewitz,
yes. After, I guess, about a year, maybe it was 6 months, Keith came up to me at a show in New York, and he said, Bob, I've got an idea for a project. He said, I can get hold of steel from the World Trade Center, and I would like each of the 7 people who had made knives for his collection, for that young firefighter who died on 9/11. He would like to have each of the 7 make a commemorative knife from steel from the World Trade Center. And of course I agreed, and we went right into the project, and I made my classic Model 30 Battle Guard. Lischwitz did his, and everybody did kind of like their signature knives. And we came up with a group of 7 knives. Tom Way, who had been making Coca-Cola boxes, made a beautiful Coca-Cola box with a glass top that was engraved with the World Trade Center image. And eventually, Keith took this set and traveled around the country to various museums, and it was on display at various exhibitions of World Trade Center memorabilia and so forth. And finally, we auctioned it off. He sent it back to me. I made sure it was all clean and everything, and presented it to an auction house in, I think it was Chicago. And they auctioned it off, and the proceeds went to the New York City Firemen's Burn Hospital.
And one of the rules of the knives is they can never be sold for profit.
They can never be sold.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have a piece of the angle iron that came from the World Trade Center. It's all burned and twisted, but it is commemorative, and it's in my shop right now.
And when I walk by it, sometimes I pick it up and I smell it, and it still smells like fire.
Yeah.
Didn't go away after all those years. So anyway, so this has not been the happiest podcast, but I wanted you to tell that story. And it's been rather serious, but that's okay. Life is serious sometimes.
Yep, certainly is.
And I just want to thank Lori. If you're looking for Rick's Knives, rickhindererknives.com. And are you on social media, Lori? Is he on social media?
Yes, he is. Of course, he puts YouTube videos up, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram, those major ones there. So.
Yeah, well, that seems to be enough. And the reason we did this podcast is because we're not on TikTok. We can't do a TikTok dance.
No, so. I'm not either.
So, what else? Anything else? I just thank you for being here and sharing your life with us and your wisdom.
Yeah, it was great seeing you at the Blade Show also.
Yeah, it's great seeing you folks there, and it always takes a while to recover from that show. It's just so
well, we're still doing
busy.
that, yeah.
But we're still doing that. we put the extra effort in this year recovering. But I did see Rick, but I never saw you at the show. I only saw Rick. I saw Rick many times.
Yeah. I guess I would just see you in passing in a crowd or something. And it's difficult sometimes to connect with people there.
Oh, it is. So. It is. And you don't want to walk into a crowd of people talking and then say, hi, and interrupt them.
That's the Blade Show.
So anyway, well.
Right. You got it. I really appreciate you having me on here. It's been very fun. I was looking forward to it.
Did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please share this with a friend and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Please support our efforts through Patreon at TheKnifeWife, and for all Terzuola goodness, go to terzuola.net. And remember, if you're not laughing, you're not living. Comments and questions can be made on Instagram at The KnifeWife Podcast or our Facebook group, The KnifeWife Podcast. And if you're a couple who work together and would like to be on our podcast, tell us about yourself with an email at eccentricsuz.com or terzuola.net.